This evening, we're talking to Laurie Marker, who is the director of the Cheetah Conservation Fund based in Namibia. She's done unbelievable work for the conservation of cheetahs, both in Namibia and throughout Africa, and most recently probably in Somaliland, but we'll hear about that a little bit later. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Marker. I think at the outset, probably tell us about the CCF's mission.
Well, the mission of the Cheetah Conservation Fund is to keep cheetahs living free and in the wild. Pretty simple. Yeah. But with that, we also work with communities and the people on whose land the cheetah is living.
And you're based in Namibia?
That's correct. And I've been based there. I set up the foundation in 1990 at Namibia's independence and have been there ever since. My research in Namibia started, though, back in the early 1970s. Oh, wow. So I have a very long history with cheetahs and Namibia.
And tell us why Namibia? I mean, to many people, they probably think of it as just a big desert with lots of beautiful scenery and the old gemsbok sitting on a dune. Why Namibia? Well,
Namibia is what we call the cheetah capital of the world. And it does have the one of the last large remaining populations of cheetahs and has. And I set up the foundation there because we have a chance to try to save those that are there. In a perspective, there are about 7,000 cheetahs left in the world today.
Now, if I'm correct, most of those cheetahs in Namibia are in fact free-ranging. They're not living in protected areas, correct?
That's correct. Most of the cheetahs that are found in the world or in Africa today are found, about 80% of them are found outside of protected areas. So as I said, there are about 7,000 cheetahs left. They're found in 31 populations in about 23 countries. And then from that, about 20 of those populations, though, are less than 100 individuals. So we've got some real serious issues that we are facing when it comes to how we're going to save the cheetah for future generations.
And what do you think the greatest challenges are to cheetah conservation right now?
Well, the biggest problems facing them are, in a nutshell, loss of habitat, and that then includes loss of prey. From that, we've got issues around human-wildlife conflict because the majority of the animals are found outside of protected areas. And then we have issues today with the illegal wildlife pet trade, which is pretty regional up around the Horn of Africa.
Now, you've been doing some work up there in Somaliland fairly recently. Can you tell us about that? Give us a really nice overview of where these cheetahs going in the pet trade, where are they coming from, and give us an idea of what it's like to operate in a place like Somaliland.
Well, the Somaliland is a breakaway from Somalia, which most people don't understand. And they are an independent country, which is not a recognized country anywhere in the world. So right there, have a few difficulties. From that, it is a democratic country, and the government has been working very closely with us to try to stop the illegal wildlife pet trade. The animals are coming up from, we believe, Ethiopia. In the years past, we thought even from Kenya, from Somalia, and they are coming, and Somaliland, and they're on their way to the Middle East to satisfy that pet trade. And from that, we also work in the Middle East to try to work with the governments on law enforcement and to try to stop the demand. And so it is a two-way street, supply and demand. In the years that we've been there, and we set up operations there around 5 years ago. And from that, it was because we ended up with confiscated cubs. They have nothing. Somaliland's the fourth poorest country in the world. And so with that, coming from the southern part of Africa, most of the supplies that we have actually come up from South Africa, containers full of wire to build pens. Today, we have 94 cheetahs that are sitting at our center in Somaliland. And these have all been taken from the wild. We see what happens is that the herders out in the fields, it's very pastoral. And from that, we are told that they find a mother with cubs, they chase the mother away, get the cubs, or kill her, and then steal the cubs and then try to get them through the camel train, basically into Somaliland, which is the closest area over into Yemen that goes up into the Middle East. And for every one cheetah that might make it into the pet trade, about 4 or 5 of them die. And for the one that does make it there, it might only have a lifespan of a year or two because the people don't know how to properly take care of them. So it is a huge problem. Over the last few years, or the last 10 years, as we've been monitoring it, we've seen anywhere from 200 to 300 animals a year that are going into this trade. And so obviously, if you get a cheetah and you fall in love with it and it purrs to you and it's cute and little, and it dies, you want to go get another one. The cheetah is an animal that does not breed well in captivity. And so the wild is where the animals are coming from. So we've worked with the government as they've confiscated the animals. We've had to put together rescue centers. At this point in time, the government has given us a large piece of land, about 150,000 acres, where we are not only built a sanctuary for these animals, but the government's asked us to help develop conservancies and national parks in a similar way as Namibia has conservancies as well. So that's kind of in a nutshell what the problem is and what we've been doing and why we are there.
Now, those 94 cheetah that you have there, obviously you know about the issues we have with lions bred in captivity in South Africa and the fact that they will never be able to be rewilded again because they're too used to people and they're dangerous. Cheetahs, that doesn't apply, does it? I mean, can you rewild those 94 animals?
Well, probably not, because as they've come in very sickly. And so we've had a lot of nutritional problems, and those 94 are not the only animals that we've had our hands on, or the government has in the last 5 years. Probably about 50% more have come in basically dead. They come in starved to almost death or death. And the ones that we're able to save have taken a huge amount of time and energy. We've got Western veterinarians there, Western trained. I mean, I'm going to say South Africa is also Western trained. And caretakers that are, the top in the world to be able to actually get a handle on this and get onto the front line as quickly as possible when the cats are confiscated. And so that mortality has actually declined at this point to probably less than 20%. But that's why we are there, and we got our foothold there, is that we needed to actually stop that killing and the dying of these animals so rapidly. And so as I said, our job is to also keep animals living free and in the wild. And so with that, we've been on the grounds doing a lot of surveys like we do in Namibia with, not only social surveys, but also setting up camera traps and learning more about where the wildlife is, but understanding from the people what their needs are and how they can be a solution to the problem. And that solution is to not bring them in from the wild and to try to help keep them in the wild. And so both Ethiopia and Somaliland have not had a lot of attention. Ethiopia has a lot of wildlife as well. It's a big country. Also, you end up with, political issues or issues around tribal politics. And wildlife has to kind of go beyond that. And I think much of that is also driven by poverty.
Let's go back to Namibia. Let's go back to the facility that you have. Tell us about your facility. Tell us about, well, let's start with the actual cheetah research that you're doing there.
Great. Well, we are a research-based organization. And so in the beginning, I'm going to say that over 30 years ago, we really didn't know a lot about cheetahs. And so my basic research was to start to find out more about the basic biology, the genetic makeup, and the overall ecology of these animals, how they were living on the land, how large their home ranges were, where they were living, what they were hunting, how they lived, breeding, with them breeding, what kind of social structures they had. So that was really the basis of our work. And it is kind of interesting to know that much of that information was not known. And the farmers didn't know anything about these animals that were living on their land. And then they thought they all were just going to go eat their livestock. And so by working with the farming communities, we learned an awful lot about the farming systems and why some farmers were catching and killing more animals versus others that were living in harmony with nature. And so those were many of the things that we were promoting. And that came into good livestock management on it, making sure that you have enough grass on your land, you're not overgrazing it, rotational herd movement of your animals on the lands. These are hard things to do in communal areas or with the pastoralists. And so these are also much of what we've studied and tried to understand. So we have a full-scale genetics lab at our center. And we are based in the north central area of Namibia, around the Waterberg Plateau in Namibia's Waterberg Plateau. And we are a very large model farm and wildlife reserve within a conservancy that borders on a national park. And so by having a model farm, we actually put our conservation research into action. So we have, for instance, livestock guarding dogs. And I developed this program back in the early 90s, where we breed and place Kangal dogs and Anatolian shepherds. We've been able to bring that program into South Africa, which has been very active, also into Botswana and some of the other areas in Africa, but also have taken many of the programs that we're doing with predators into other areas of the world, like the United States, Europe, South America, who also have predator problems. And so in the name of the cheetah, for instance, our livestock guarding dog program, where we have bred and placed nearly 800 of the dogs over nearly 25 years, is that we see between an 80 to 100% decrease of livestock loss if the farmers have this dog. And not just the Kangals and the Anatolians. We picked this breed because they are a dog that comes from the Anatolian Plateau, which is also, they have a short hair coat, but they are used to being in high desert, and Namibia is a high desert. They are a dog that lives in vast open areas, and so they don't need attending. They are an independent thinker. And what happens is they grow up with the flocks, and then they bark loudly and they keep predators away. They mark territories and predators stay away. Then predators don't really want to get hurt. I think many people think that all predators just want to go eat people's livestock, and yet they would rather have wildlife. And so what we've tried to do is to help through our model farm, have people understand that if we manage our livestock, we manage our grasslands, and we manage our wildlife, the predators can actually live within the system and not be a problem to our livestock. And then the predators play the role that they play, which is so key, which is being a top-down predator that actually maintains the ecosystems by feeding the rest of the ecosystem, which feeds the biodiversity. So where you have these top predators, you have greater biodiversity.
I think what the most interesting thing you said there, amongst many, was that having a top predator in the system actually enhances biodiversity, and I think that's really key. I'm going to circle back to your dogs because I read something on your website about a scat detection dog. Now, talk me through that, please.
Scat detection dogs are, go find scat. Scat's poop. We call it black gold because from this scat, you can get a lot out of it. We take the scat then into our genetics lab, and we can extract the DNA. And from that, we can still understand more about the different populations that are out there, individual animals, where they're living. And we do also work with African wild dogs as well as cheetahs. So our team right now is actually up in Angola, where they go up a couple times a year and have for the past several years, helping look at where the populations are of some of the predators in that area as well, or that country. But we've done our scat work throughout our Namibian landscape. From this, the dogs are trained just like a drug dog would be, and they cover large areas. We've gridded out many of these areas. A lot of these areas in Namibia, we've also put camera traps up with as well to get understanding a little bit more about where the cheetahs are and which individuals. And then as the dogs find the scat by sniffing and smelling. So dogs have great scent. And so it's a pretty active program, and it's a pretty interesting program. We've helped
Okay.
also develop a program up in Kenya, and
Mhm.
we, from our genetics lab, have been actively working with also the genetics of the Kenyan population, as well as that of our Somaliland animals to find out where they've come from as well. So it's a part of our genetics program.
And is it possible genetically? I mean, they have such a narrow genetic or shallow genetic pool, cheetahs. Is it possible to take a Somaliland cheetah and put it into a Kenyan or Namibian population without it causing some sort of species issue? I mean, would you do that, or do you have to keep these populations separate?
Well, they are very, very similar, and these they are so similar that they actually need augmentation probably in some of the populations. Out of the 31 populations that are remaining, remember there's only 7,000 cheetahs.
Yeah.
20 of those populations are under 100 individuals.
Okay.
And they're breeding to extinction. The last of the Asian population is in Iran, and there are less than 20 animals there.
Mm.
So that augmentation is going to be important. The genetic work that we've all been doing has actually shown that there is some differentiation, but the cheetahs actually have had a slow decline in their genetics over the past 15,000 years. One theory having been that they survived in a very low number the Pleistocene extinction, which was about 15,000 years ago, leaving a very, very small gene pool, and then they've come back from that. And with this, they're so close that that they can be augmented by populations, and the only population that we have enough of is really in the Southern African area. So
Yes.
these will become political questions, and those are some of the questions that we are starting to bring forward, working together with a global team of geneticists to try to find consensus and compromise, because we can, it's kind of, I think you call them lumpers and splitters.
Mm.
And you can just say, oh no, we can only have the Iranian cheetah.
Yeah.
Well, with 12 animals, they're going to go extinct. So we dealt with a similar issue in the United States around an animal called the Florida panther.
Mm.
And it was the Florida subspecies of the panther cougar in North America, and its numbers were down to, it was an isolated, pocketed population. Very, very few, and they were extremely had extreme problems genetically, as have cheetahs, with poor sperm quality, but they were actually almost extinct. I mean, the males were cryptorchid, 90% abnormal sperm. And so it was recommended to maintain the habitat for these animals and bring in and augment them with the Texas panther. And from that, a few years later, we ended up, I mean, they had like 90% cub mortality, weak cub syndrome. And from that, the population is thriving now in Florida. And so augmentation can play an important role. And these are things that I think we really need to be discussing and talking about.
Yeah.
The lumpers and splitters all hate each other, and there's no, keep it pure. And as purists today, it's going to go extinct. And I want to actually point out that we are in our 6th global extinction in the world. And I think that a lot of people are in la la land thinking that we can continue living the way we are. But we are seeing a declining of species at a rate that we've never seen before. And this has happened really only in the last 100 years. And it's a human caused extinction. And so right now we can actually save some of these species, but we're going to have to think outside of the box, and we're going to have to act fast. And we're going to have to act as a team of the best trained scientists there are. And I'm hoping that from the work that we've done for so long can play a very key role to make sure that the cheetah is not lost in all of these populations.
That's it's very sad. It's very inspiring to hear you talk, but at the same time depressing. Which I suppose is conservation really at this state of at this stage of our lives. Tell me quickly before we end, how can people get involved? How would you like people to get involved in cheetah conservation? People who watch this, Do they go to your website to donate? Should they phone you up and come and volunteer? What's the best way that people can get involved?
Well, I would love them to do both. So our website is cheetah.org, and we do welcome everybody around the world. And we do have organizations in many countries in the world. So we are a registered NGO in Namibia, up in the United States, and the UK, Canada, Australia, Belgium. We have partners in Germany, France, Italy. So we welcome people to get involved. Go to our website, cheetah.org. And then, yes, we need funding, because conservation, I think a lot of people think just is because we're nice people. My organization has nearly 200 people that we are employing in order to work throughout the different ranges. Of course, Namibia is our main base, where we have nearly 150 staff members there. Somaliland is upwards to now 25 plus. I want to say that many people in South Africa have come in and helped us. We've had a lot of people from Europe that have come in and helped us as well. We do take volunteers. We welcome interns to learn more about some of the strategies that we're involved in to save the cheetah and change the world. So please get involved. Write a check. I think that's always helpful, and you can do that on our website as well. But just, I hope that people understand that the cheetah does need help today, probably more help than we've ever seen and needed before in the past.
Dr. Laurie Marker, founder of the Cheetah Conservation Fund, cheetah conservationist extraordinaire. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for inspiring us. And I hope that this interview will inspire a lot of other people who want to get involved, in cheetah conservation, but in wildlife generally, and in saving our biodiversity generally. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.